It's the half moon night and it's time to reflect on the Dhamma. So I try and share something I kind of practice with. So the Buddha's teachings, that's our bloodline, living this life. And the word Buddha means the enlightened one. So, Buddha has given all the teachings that are needed for enlightenment, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. And the word Buddha means to awaken. So, awakening the mind. We all live in a dream, we live in a dream and we have to awaken from this dream, seeing the reality of things. So all of us have heard the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. But I'm sure that's why we're all here, taking this up, taking this life, coming to the monastery, because we have heard the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, which is the core teachings of the Buddha. But hearing it, or I can say I haven't awakened myself fully hearing it. So what's missing? Not being able to awaken oneself, fully awaken oneself after hearing the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Well, I think hearing it and knowing it is one thing, but bringing it to the present moment is another thing. I think that's the missing point, not bringing it alive, bringing it to the present moment. So there are many aspects of Buddha's teachings, and I like to I have chosen the 5 aggregates of clinging to talk about. And the 5 aggregates of clinging, I have chosen this sutta, Asivisopama Sutta, the simile of the vipers. It's in the Samyutta Nikaya. And it's a very long sutta about explaining about many things, but Buddha starts that sutta by saying, a person who likes happiness, who doesn't like death, comes along, and this person is given these 4 vipers with horrible venom. And the person is asked to take it as it belongs to the person, but the person has to, from time to time, lift it, bathe it, feed it, and rest it. And if that's not done, the vipers will get angry, and then there will be pain, and you can experience painful death, or painful, go through pain, the one who doesn't want to go through pain and death. So these 4 vipers are simile and a metaphor, because I find Buddha is always teaching using metaphors and similes. For me, that's a very clever way of teaching the Dhamma. And Buddha is one of the greatest teachers, I find. So with these similes, things come alive for me. and they help to understand it in a deeper way. So these 4 vipers are compared to the 4 elements. The element of extension, the earth element, the element of fluidity, the water element, the element of heat, the fire element, and the element of motion, the air element. So these 4 elements, in the world we have these 4 elements, everything is, these are, consist of these 4 elements, they come together. The body is formed by 4 elements coming together. And when you look at the world, the 4 elements are there, and if these 4 elements get agitated, we have tsunamis, we have hurricanes, we have floods. So that's what happens in the world. And in the same way, in this body, when the 4 elements are disturbed and agitated, we get sick and die. So that's why these bodies, we have to change our posture, wash it, feed it, rest it, just like the 4 vipers need that kind of attention. So if we don't do that to these bodies, naturally, the body will get sick and die. So that's the way to understand this body, the nature of this body. So maybe that's the dream we are living in, and that's what we have to wake up to understand the Buddha's teachings, seeing things in their reality. And it's the 4 elements, it's a good way of contemplating and meditating on 4 elements. And in the same sutta, Buddha goes along to say that there are 5 executioners, murderous executioners. These 5 executioners are compared to the 5 aggregates. So that's why I chose this sutta to talk about the 5 aggregates of clinging. So the first aggregate is the form. And the form is made of 4 elements. So we can, and having a body, it's the body that, having this body, we have to look after this body. And it's this body that kills the body really, because either you can get a heart attack or cancer or something, and the body dies with that, within the body can kill oneself. So that's the true nature of this body. We create this body, that's what we get born into. Birth is creating this body, having a body, not knowing the very same body that we create will kill us one day, because death is imminent, isn't it? So that is the way to understand this birth. Because everybody who's born has to get old, get sick and die. Nobody has escaped that. But that's the first dart. So nobody can escape old age, sickness and death. That's common to all of us. And that's the first dart, that's the suffering everybody has to go through. But if somebody is hit with a dart and a second dart is hit at the same place, that's the second dart. The Buddha was talking about how we can overcome the suffering which can be overcome. what mind makes out of this old age, sickness and death. So that's the second dart, which through meditation and through mind training, we are trying to understand and overcome. Because the first dart is common to all of us, but the second dart is something we can do something about the second dart. And that's what Buddhist teachings are pointing to, how to overcome this suffering. And through meditation, contemplation, and reflection. So going back to the 5 aggregates, we all know about, well, to a certain extent, we know about the impermanence and the suffering because we have lived 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. I think everybody here. So as we get old, as we live this life, through life experiences, we do understand, we do come across the impermanence and the unsatisfactoriness of this existence. But as we grow older, we try to control what's around us. And that kind of behavior, what we tend to do, that's happening, that's something constructed in the mind. The mind constructs all these things, through feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, the remaining 4 aggregates. So that's something we can be aware of, try to understand and observe. It's a question of observing and being aware of and understanding what's happening in the mind. We can't eliminate these things. It's not a question of, oh yes, I have anger, I have greed, I must eliminate it. It doesn't work like that. First we have to observe and understand this process. It's a question of observing and understanding the process as it happens every day. So the more we do that observing and understanding, hopefully, the more we understand it, more we become at ease with it. So the feelings, we have pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings. And what the perception does is, what we feel, what we perceive, and what we perceive, we apprehend. So the perception is the culprit in my understanding, because we perceive things. Well, in day-to-day life, I have experienced many times how I have perceived it wrong. And we carry these perceptions of situations, of people, we carry these perceptions around. Carrying these perceptions, we bear grudges. And it can lead to quarrels and disputes. So it's the perception that mostly I find the culprit is. So when we perceive things, we perceive it in the wrong way. Most of the time, I can say that. And we learn by creating wrong perceptions. And Buddha has compared perception to a mirage. We are seeing something that's not there. Like the deer who runs after the mirage. They run and run and run. Once they get near the mirage, they realize there's no water. So perception is also something, that's the way the perception is explained by the Buddha. So we perceive things that are inherently unsatisfactory because everything is changing. We know that things never stay the same, they change all the time. But it's very difficult to see that anicca, the perception of impermanence. We make it permanent. So that's where we get the perception wrong. The impermanence is seen as permanent. And then we think anything and everything will give us pleasure. As soon as we see something, if you take an example, day-to-day examples, if you see food, we straight away think, oh, that will give me pleasure. So that's how we perceive things straight away. It has to give me pleasure, it's permanent, and it belongs to me. We try to make it our own, yes? So this is how we perceive things, and that's the perception, and that's the world we live in, and that's the dream world we live in, which we need to wake up from and see the reality of things, the impermanence, the unsatisfactoriness, and not self. So the more we choose to learn to perceive things in this way, hopefully, maybe the suffering reduces. That's what the teachings are all about, as far as I know it. So that's the work we have to do. And when we see our existence in this way, because the existence, these bodies, we all have bodies and a body and a mind, and it's all that is there is these 5 aggregates. And we all have it. So the more we understand through this mind and body, what's going on in this mind and body, the more we observe and understand it, we can realize if it's true for this body and mind, it's true for everybody around me. Because we are all human beings. And the more we see that, the mind expands, seeing the true nature of this existence. And when we see the truth with using this mind and body, then we can see that everybody around us is having the same mind and body and suffering and creating suffering in the same way. And more we can understand this, the mind can open up and we can have loving kindness and compassion for all beings, because if this person is suffering, it's true for all around me. And that will help us to live in harmony, to see each other as beings, all beings who are suffering, going through the same feelings, perceptions, mental formations, having a body, and being conscious. To be able to see people in this way and having loving kindness for all people around us. And there was another simile given for these 5 aggregates, which said a blind person is given a dirty cloth, and this person is told that this is a very precious, beautiful cloth. It's a dirty cloth, but he is told it's a very precious, beautiful cloth. Look after it. So this blind person is holding on to this cloth, thinking it's very beautiful and very precious. But it's a very dirty old cloth. And one day this person is able to cure his blindness, and this person sees that the cloth for the first time and realize it's a dirty old cloth which has been taken as a very precious, beautiful cloth all this time. And suddenly you wake up, I suppose. So that's how I see that simile. These 5 aggregates are compared to this dirty cloth. And when we understand the true nature of this existence, we wake up to the fact that we have been holding on to something that's not giving us lasting happiness, and wake up to the reality. And also these perceptions are born out of distorted view. I think I mentioned that before as well. It's not seeing things as they are. We create taking things as mine, things that don't belong, nothing belongs to us really, but we perceive them as mine. And when we perceive things as mine, we create the existence. So that's the post-perception of seeing a perception of a distorted view. The more we have these distorted views, we create wrong perceptions. And taking things, impermanent things as permanent, we create views and opinions. That's a post-perception of taking impermanence as permanence. How views and opinions are created. Because if we see things as impermanent, our views and opinions will be different. So that's the training I think one has to do through meditation, that's through contemplation and reflection, to be able to see things in the right light, in their true nature. So it's a lifelong practice. I don't think I'll have to persevere, put the effort, persevere, and work with it, have the patience to work with it and be with it. Well, it's interesting, why I chose the 5 aggregates was there is another sutta which explains, it's between Venerable Sariputta and Mahakotita. and they were having a conversation, and Venerable Mahakotita asks Venerable Sariputta, how does one who is virtuous develop wise reflection? So Venerable Sariputta explains, saying, one has to take these 5 aggregates and contemplate for their true nature, that is, for his impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. It's divided into, these 3 are divided into a finer sections of 11, but that's what he said to Venerable Sariputta, said to Venerable Mahakotita, to take the body as something that changes all the time, and a perception as a disease, and so on and so forth. And I think in that he explained the consciousness, the vijnana, to be a dart. A dart that the consciousness is compared to a dart because we get affected by the darts, when a dart is hit, we get affected by it. And Buddha said that the consciousness is, on average, it's hitting us about 100 darts, because how we see things, oh, so-and-so is doing harm to me. How dare she speaks to me like that? How am I treated like this? Why is it had to be me? That's the kind of darts Buddha was talking about. So on average, Buddha was saying how from the time you wake up, oh, I have to go to work today, or I have to go to puja, that kind of darts. We are hit by those darts every day, on average, apparently 100 times. Maybe more. So why I brought this sutta is because he was asking how a virtuous develops wise reflection. So he said, this is how a person develops wise reflection, by contemplating on the 5 aggregates. And then he said, when somebody contemplates on these 5 aggregates, a virtuous person, if he contemplates on these 5 aggregates, and he will reach the first stage of enlightenment. So the question and answer, the debate goes on, and then what a person who has reached the first stage of enlightenment, what does that person has to do? So Venerable Sariputta repeats, it's the same. You contemplate on the 5 aggregates. So if you contemplate on the 5 aggregates, once you have reached the first stage of enlightenment, that's a stream enterer, you get to the stage of once returner, if you contemplate on the 5 aggregates. So then the question is asked, what happens, how does the person who is once returner develop wise reflection? The same answer, contemplate on 5 aggregates. So when the once returner contemplates on 5 aggregates, that person becomes a non-returner. And it goes on, when the non-returner contemplates on 5 aggregates, becomes an arahat, an fully enlightened being. So the question is asked, so what happens to the fully enlightened being? Venerable Sariputta says, still has to contemplate on the 5 aggregates. Nothing changes. So that's why I took this subject of 5 aggregates, because it's that important. Whether the work is done, we start by contemplating on 5 aggregates, and once the work is done, still it's the same thing we do. We still have to look after this mind by contemplating on 5 aggregates. And it finishes by saying, a fully enlightened being contemplating on these 5 aggregates abides in peace and tranquility. That's all the work that has to be done. The fully enlightened being has finished the work, but still contemplating on these 5 aggregates, the person can have a good abiding, lives in pleasure, having the long-lasting pleasure. That's what we are seeking. And develop sati sampajanya, that is, being fully aware and full comprehension. So that's interesting when I read that, because yes, we start with it as a learner, start with the 5 aggregates, contemplate it, reflect on it, and try to understand the true nature of this body, feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. And then one understands it fully, but still practice the same. So I thought that's a very beautiful way of understanding these teachings, because we all have to do the same thing at whatever level we are. To contemplate this mind and body. That's all the work we have to do. So I think that's all I can think of for the moment about these 5 aggregates. I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about it, but that's what comes to my mind. And I like to end it here. Thank you for your attention. Wish you all well on your practice.